Everyone at Forward Operating Base Keating knew her as Sarah, the quiet woman who served lumpy mashed potatoes and kept her head down. But when a distress call screamed through the radio on a snowy Christmas Eve, the soldiers were about to learn a terrifying truth. Sarah wasn't just a cook. She was the most dangerous weapon they had never used. The smell of instant coffee and industrial-strength cleaner hung heavy in the air of the mess hall. Outside, the wind howled through the Hindu Kush mountains, driving snow against the reinforced siding of the Forward Operating Base. It was Christmas Eve, but inside the perimeter wire, the holiday spirit was fighting a losing battle against exhaustion and the bitter cold. Sarah Jenkins wiped down the stainless steel serving counter, her movements rhythmic and slow. She wore a stained apron over her fatigues, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that violated at least 3 regulations. To the men of Bravo Platoon, she was just the Spoon, a mid-30s logistics transfer who seemingly had no skills beyond opening cans of beans and avoiding eye contact. "Hey, Spoon, you got any actual food back there, or just more of this grey sludge?" The voice belonged to Corporal Tex Grady, a loud-mouthed heavy gunner who sat with his boots up on a bench. His squad laughed. They were geared up, checking weapons, preparing for a hearts and minds drop to a village 6 clicks north, a routine patrol, a milk run for Christmas. Sarah didn't look up. "Stew is hot, Corporal. Take it or leave it." "She speaks!" Tex jeered, grabbing his helmet. "Don't worry, boys. When we get back, maybe the Spoon will have baked us some cookies." Sarah watched them go. Her eyes, usually dull and disinterested, sharpened for a fraction of a second as she scanned their loadouts. Grady's plate carrier is riding too low. Private O'Malley hasn't taped his loose straps. Lieutenant Carter looks distracted. She shook her head and returned to the potatoes. It wasn't her job anymore. That life, the life of adrenaline, night vision, and silence, was buried under 3 years of redactions and a new identity. She was just a cook. That was the deal she made to keep her sanity intact after the disaster in Yemen. The door to the mess hall banged open an hour later. It wasn't hungry soldiers. It was silence. A deep, heavy silence that radiated from the Command Operations Center, COC, across the yard. Sarah paused, the knife hovering over a potato. She knew that silence. She had lived in it. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked out the back door, lighting a cigarette she didn't really smoke. She stood in the shadow of the generator, listening. The wind carried voices from the open door of the COC. "Lost contact with Bravo ambush, multiple hostiles." The voice was Lieutenant Colonel Vance, the base commander. He sounded frantic. "QRF is grounded, sir. The blizzard has 0 visibility. Birds can't fly. We can't get to them." Sarah dropped the cigarette. She didn't stomp it out. She crushed it with a slow, deliberate twist of her boot. The milk run had gone sour. She walked into the COC. She didn't knock. She didn't ask for permission. She just walked in. "Get out of here, specialist," Vance barked, not looking up from the map table where static hissed from the radio. "We have a situation." "I know," Sarah said. Her voice was different. The mumble was gone. It was cold, flat, and commanded the room. "Where are they?" Vance looked up, confused by the tone. "Excuse me? Bravo Platoon. Grid coordinates. Now. Specialist Jenkins, return to the mess hall immediately, or I will have you arrested," Vance shouted, stress making the veins in his neck bulge. "We are dealing with a mass casualty event." "Your QRF is grounded, Colonel," Sarah said, stepping closer to the map. She pointed a finger, steady as a rock, at a choke point in the valley. "They hit them here, didn't they? The blind turn past the ridge. It's a kill box." Vance blinked. "How did you?" "Because if I were them, that's where I'd hit you." Sarah reached up and pulled the hair tie from her bun. Her hair fell, framing a face that was suddenly hard, predatory. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn challenge coin, slamming it onto the map. It wasn't an army coin. It was heavy, black metal, bearing the trident insignia of the Navy SEALs, but modified. It was a Tier 1 designator, the kind that didn't officially exist. Vance stared at the coin, then at the cook. The color drained from his face. Jenkins. But the file said logistics. The file is a lie to keep me invisible, Colonel. My name isn't Jenkins, and I'm not a cook. She looked at the comms officer. Give me the radio. What? Give me the damn headset. Sarah snatched it. Bravo 1, this is Kitchen. Sitrep, over. Static. Then a voice, choked with pain. It was Lieutenant Carter. Kitchen? Get off the line, we're pinned. Texas hit heavy fire from the high ground. We can't. Carter, listen to me, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the panic like a scalpel. I am coming to get you. Do not move. Do not break cover. If you see movement in the snow, do not shoot unless you are certain it isn't me. Do you copy? You're coming? Alone? Spoon, you're crazy. I'm not the Spoon anymore, Carter. She tossed the headset back to the stunned comms officer. She looked at Vance. I need a vehicle, and I need access to the armory, the special locker, the one you keep for the contractors. Vance hesitated for only a second. He looked at the blizzard raging outside, then at the woman standing before him. The cook was gone. In her place stood a warrior. Give her whatever she wants, Vance whispered. Sarah turned to leave. Keep the coffee hot, Colonel. I'll be back for breakfast. The Humvee roared through the blinding white, the tires fighting for traction on the ice-slicked road. Sarah drove with one hand, the other adjusting the plate carrier she had raided from the armory. It was heavy, unfamiliar, but comforting. She had swapped her apron for a tactical rig. She carried an HK-416 with a suppressor and thermal optics, expensive gear usually reserved for special forces, kept in the back of the armory for visiting dignitaries. She also had a Sig Sauer on her hip and a combat knife strapped to her boot. The drive was 20 minutes of hell. The snow was falling so hard it felt like driving into a white sheet. But Sarah didn't need to see the road. She felt it. She visualized the terrain map she had memorized in seconds back at the base. 2 miles to the ridge, 1 mile to the ambush site. She killed the headlights. From here on, she was a ghost. She parked the Humvee behind a rock outcropping, a half-mile from the engagement zone. The sound of gunfire cracked through the cold air, sharp, distinctive snaps of AK-47s answering the desperate bursts of American carbines. Sarah moved. She didn't run. She flowed. She moved through the deep snow with a terrifying efficiency, utilizing the whiteout conditions as cover. She wasn't fighting the storm. She was part of it. She reached the high ground overlooking the valley. Through her thermal scope, the scene below was a chaotic smudge of heat signatures. Bravo platoon was pinned down behind 2 disabled vehicles. They were in bad shape. She could see 3 heat signatures prone in the snow, wounded. The enemy, about 20 fighters, had the high ground on the opposite side, firing down with impunity. They were moving to flank, closing the net. These weren't ragtag militia. They were moving in fire teams, bounding Overwatch. Professionals, mercenaries, Sarah realized. Someone paid for a hit on Christmas. She exhaled a cloud of steam, slowing her heart rate. She adjusted the windage on her scope. The wind was howling left to right. Time to cook, she whispered. She didn't aim for the soldiers suppressing Bravo. She aimed for the leader. She scanned the enemy line until she found him. A figure standing slightly back, gesturing, directing the fire. She squeezed the trigger. Phut! The suppressor coughed. 400 yards away, the leader's heat signature collapsed instantly. Before the enemy could realize what happened, Sarah shifted fire. 2 rapid shots. The machine gunner on the far right ridge went silent. Down in the valley, the enemy fire faltered. They were confused. They were taking fire from a new angle, from a ghost in the storm. Sarah tapped her radio. "Bravo 1, this is Kitchen. I've cleared your right flank. Suppress the left. I'm coming down. Kitchen, is that you?" Carter's voice was barely audible. "Suppress the left, Lieutenant. Do it now." Below, the American guns roared to life, emboldened by the sudden support. Sarah used the noise as cover. She abandoned her sniper perch and began to slide down the steep, snowy embankment, moving toward the pinned squad. She hit the valley floor and sprinted across the open ground, bullets kicking up snow around her boots. She dove behind the lead Humvee, sliding in beside Corporal Tex Grady. Tex was pale, clutching a tourniquet on his thigh. He looked up, eyes wide, seeing the cook. But she wasn't wearing an apron. She was decked out in Tier 1 gear, eyes scanning the perimeter, weapon raised. "Spoon?" Tex wheezed, blood on his teeth. "What the hell are you doing here?" Sarah ignored the name. She checked his tourniquet, tightening it with a brutal efficiency that made him scream. "Saving your ass, Grady. You got a problem with that?" "No, ma'am," he groaned. "Good." Sarah looked at Lieutenant Carter. The young officer looked terrified. "Lieutenant, get your men ready. We aren't waiting for extraction. We're breaking out." "Breaking out?" Carter stammered. "There's 20 of them, and we have wounded." "There were 20, Sarah corrected, checking her magazine. "I took out 4. You guys got 1. That leaves 15. They're confused, leaderless, and they think a full SEAL team just flanked them. We use that." She grabbed a smoke grenade from Carter's vest. "When I pop this, I'm going up the middle. You provide base of fire. We push through them." "You're going up the middle?" Carter stared at her. "That's suicide." Sarah pulled the pin. The metal ring made a tiny ting sound in the cold air. "No, Lieutenant," she said, her eyes dark and hollow. "Suicide is staying here and freezing to death. This is just work." She threw the smoke. The grey smoke billowed out, mixing with the driving snow to create an impenetrable wall of fog. "Move!" Sarah screamed. She didn't wait for them. She surged forward into the smoke, abandoning cover. It was a move of pure aggression, designed to shock the enemy. The mercenaries on the ridge were expecting the Americans to hunker down, to wait for death. They weren't expecting a demon to charge them. Sarah moved through the smoke like a wraith. She saw a heat signature ahead, a mercenary moving to flank. She fired twice, center mass, without breaking stride. The man dropped. She reached the rocks where the enemy had set up their kill line. It was close quarters now, hand-to-hand range. A mercenary jumped out from behind a boulder, leveling his AK. Sarah was faster. She batted the barrel aside with her forearm and drove the stock of her rifle into his jaw, shattering bone. As he fell, she put a round in his chest. She was a whirlwind of violence. Every movement was calculated, every shot precise. She wasn't angry. She was professional. This was the skill set she had tried to forget, the muscle memory of 1,000 raids. Behind her, Bravo platoon rallied. Seeing their cook tearing through the enemy line like a mythological figure lit a fire in them. Even the wounded were firing. They pushed up the hill, screaming, pouring fire into the confused mercenaries. Sarah reached the top of the ridge. She dropped to one knee, scanning. 3 enemies were fleeing into the tree line. She raised her rifle. Breath out. Pause. Bang, bang, bang. 3 shots. 3 hits. Silence returned to the valley, heavy and sudden. The wind was the only sound. "Clear!" Sarah shouted, her voice echoing. She turned back to look at the squad. They were stumbling up the hill, exhausted, bleeding, but alive. They gathered around her, staring. Tex limped up, supported by Private O'Malley. He looked at the bodies of the mercenaries, then at Sarah. She was wiping blood, not hers, off her face. "You," Tex started, then stopped. He swallowed hard. "You're a SEAL." Sarah didn't answer. She was checking the pulse of the mercenary leader she had sniped earlier. "Female SEALs don't exist," O'Malley whispered, though he looked like he wanted to believe it. Sarah stood up. She looked at them, the adrenaline fading, leaving her cold and tired. "Lots of things don't exist, Private, until you need them to." She tapped her radio. "Kitchen to base. Ambush neutralized. Bravo is secure. We are moving to the extract point. Have the medic ready for Tex. He's going to need surgery and a lot of morphine." "Copy that, Kitchen." Vance's voice came back, thick with relief. "Good work, Sarah." The trek back to the Humvees was slow. Sarah took point, her eyes never stopping their scan. She didn't let them relax. Not yet. When they finally loaded the wounded into the vehicles, Lieutenant Carter stopped her. "Who are you really?" he asked. "I need to know what to put in the report." Sarah looked at the snowy mountains. The sun was just beginning to break through the storm clouds, a pale grey light signaling Christmas morning. "Put in the report that the cook got lucky," she said softly. "And Carter?" "Yeah. If you tell anyone about the coin, I'll burn your eggs for the rest of your deployment." Carter managed a weak smile. "Yes, Mum." The adrenaline crash was always worse than the fight itself. 2 hours after the extraction, the forward operating base was enveloped in a strange, reverent silence. The blizzard had finally broken, leaving behind a sky of piercing, innocent blue that mocked the violence of the night before. Inside the mess hall kitchen, the air was thick with the humidity of boiling water and the sharp tang of bleach. Sarah stood at the deep stainless steel sink, scrubbing a massive stockpot. Her hands, which only hours ago had held a suppressed HK-416 with surgical steadiness, were now red and raw from the hot water. Scrub, rinse, repeat. It was a ritual, a grounding exercise. The repetitive motion was the only thing that kept the memories of Yemen, and now the fresh memories of the snowy ridge, from overwhelming her. She wasn't washing away grease. She was washing away the feeling of the recoil. The heavy metal door creaked open. Sarah didn't turn. She knew the cadence of those footsteps, heavy, hesitant, authoritative. "The men are asking for you," Lieutenant Colonel Vance said. His voice echoed in the empty kitchen. "Potatoes aren't done, sir," Sarah replied, her voice flat. She kept scrubbing. "Breakfast is at Oho 700, same as every day." Vance walked closer, stopping just beside the prep table. He placed a manila folder on the stainless steel. It was thin, stamped with red ink. Eyes only. Magic clearance required. "I had to wake up a 3-star general at the Pentagon to get them to unseal this," Vance said, his tone a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Even then, they only gave me the redacted version. But it was enough." Sarah stopped scrubbing. She stared at the soapy water. "You shouldn't have done that, Colonel." "Navy Cross, Silver Star with a V device. 14 confirmed kills during Operation Anaconda alone," Vance read from the file, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And then, 3 years ago, nothing. You just vanished. The file says, medical discharge, psychological trauma. But we both know that's not true, isn't it?" Sarah turned off the faucet. The silence was deafening. She dried her hands on her apron, the rough fabric feeling familiar and safe. "The trauma is real, Colonel," she said softly, turning to face him. Her eyes were tired, stripping away the facade of the simple cook. It just didn't break me the way they thought it did. It made me too efficient. When you stop feeling the recoil, it's time to hang up the gun. Why here? Vance asked, gesturing around the grim industrial kitchen. You're a Tier 1 operator. A ghost. You could be making 6 figures as a private contractor in Dubai. You could be training the next generation at Coronado. Why are you here, in the arse end of Afghanistan, making powdered eggs for grunts? Sarah looked out the small, grease-stained window at the snow-covered mountains. Because out there, she pointed toward the ridge, it's chaos. You can do everything right, and good men still die. You can be the perfect weapon, and it still isn't enough. She turned back to the stove and picked up a ladle. But in here, I measure the water, I add the salt, I set the timer. If I follow the steps, people get fed. They feel warm. They feel safe for 20 minutes. It's the only place in the world where I can guarantee a good outcome, Colonel. I need it simple. Vance stared at her for a long moment, processing the complexity of the woman standing before him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the black challenge coin she had slammed onto his map table earlier. He placed it gently on the counter, next to the tray of bacon. We needed a warrior today, Sarah, Vance said, his voice thick with emotion. But I think my men need the cook just as much. He turned to the door. Open the line, specialist. They're waiting. Sarah waited until he was gone. She picked up the coin, feeling its weight one last time, then shoved it deep into her pocket, beneath the apron. She took a deep breath, smoothing her hair, and unlocked the serving shutter. The metal grate rolled up with a loud clatter. Usually the mess hall was a cacophony of scraping chairs, shouting voices, and clanking trays. Today it was silent. Every soldier from Bravo platoon was there. Some were bandaged. Private O'Malley had his arm in a sling. Lieutenant Carter was sporting a butterfly bandage over his eye, and right at the front of the line, sitting in a wheelchair with his leg elevated and wrapped in thick gauze, was Corporal Tex Grady. They weren't eating, they were standing, watching. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. She gripped the serving spoon tighter, her knuckles turning white. She hated this. She hated the hero worship. She just wanted to serve the food. Well, Sarah barked, her voice cracking slightly before finding its usual steel. Line starts here. Take a tray or get out. Nobody moved. Then, Tex cleared his throat. He looked at the woman who had charged a machine gun nest to save his life. The woman he had mocked for her lumpy mashed potatoes for 3 months. Chef, Tex said. He didn't say spoon. He said chef, with the same respect he would give a general. Requesting a double ration of those eggs, ma'am. I hear they're life-saving. A ripple of laughter went through the room, breaking the heavy tension. But it wasn't mocking laughter. It was the laughter of relief, of brothers in arms who had looked death in the face and walked away because of her. One by one, the applause started. It wasn't a raucous cheer. It was a slow, rhythmic clapping, a purely Western salute. Lieutenant Carter saluted. O'Malley nodded. Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She looked down at the eggs, blinking rapidly to clear the moisture in her eyes. She wasn't a SEAL right now. She wasn't a legend. She was Sarah. And these were her boys. Coming right up, Tex, she said, her voice soft. She piled the plate high. As the line began to move, the normalcy returned. The clatter of forks, the smell of coffee, the low hum of conversation. But the dynamic had shifted forever. Sarah watched them eat from her station behind the steam table. She realized then that she hadn't really left the life behind. She had just changed her post. She wasn't hiding from the war. She was guarding them from it, one meal at a time. And if the wolf ever came to the door again, the cook would be ready. She smiled just a little and cracked another egg. That is the untold power of the quiet ones. You never know who is serving your coffee or standing next to you in line. Sometimes the heroes aren't the ones on the posters. They are the ones peeling potatoes until the moment the world needs them. If this story gave you chills, hit that like button and share it with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about the hidden heroes walking among us. Comment Merry Christmas below if you made it to the end.